My name is Anisha Srinivasan. I'm a sophomore studying psychology. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and the thing that we're studying, own race bias, is a theory that people remember faces of their own race better than faces outside of it. And I guess what we're looking into specifically in that theory is how gender plays a role, because so far, like to my knowledge, there has not been much research done on how gender plays a role in memory recognition for people.
I'm Chanel Meyers. I'm an assistant professor in the psychology department, and I run a research lab. Our lab is called Diversity and Social Cognition Lab. So our lab, we're really interested in how people perceive others based on their social categories that they hold, primarily surrounding race and gender. Because we do focus on those social categories, I think that relates highly with the CSWS mission of examining women and how holding that identity and being a woman in this society shapes important outcomes such as how you are perceived, judged, how people may act towards you, and these are all the things that we investigate in our lab. And in particular, we take a really race is gendered approach to this research, so we try not to just focus on one domain at a time, but how these different social domains interact with each other, both at not only the person's experience of being perceived, but also how that person holding those identities, how they might act in certain situations. So we try to look at it through both angles, that being the target of discrimination or stereotypes, but also how you might act based on holding these marginalized identities. And I think that really aligns with the CSWS mission of focusing on women in society.
What we're researching on race bias does impact me in the sense that we talk about some real life casualties that might happen with women of color in memory and recognition, like for job interviews and all that. If the interviewer is neither the woman's race or like a woman, they might end up being more forgotten because of their role in the societal bottom of the food chain. And so I really like the idea that we center this around women of color, and I don't think there's a lot of research in psychology that does this specific gender and race of individuals, and so I thought this would be cool.
So the CODES conference stands for the Consortium of Oregon Diversity and Equity Scholars. We just hosted our inaugural conference supported by the College of Arts and Sciences as well as CSWS and other departments across UO. We did this conference because, especially now, but it's always been so important to understand why inequities persist and how do we tackle these prejudices that exist in society. So we wanted a platform where we could bring together scholars who are studying this topic through a very rigorous scientific way, but we also wanted it to be interdisciplinary as well, which is partly why we appreciate CSWS so much, because it is an interdisciplinary center. And I think that more of that cross-field communication needs to occur, and we all obviously have similar goals of reducing inequity and biases, but we study them from slightly different perspectives. And so we thought it was really important to make some sort of event to kind of pull us all together and connect with each other. So by having this event, we're providing another opportunity to scholars and students to present their work at a prestigious event that they can then put on their resume or CV. And so we had kind of twofold goals in that, in building community, but also providing this opportunity and resource for folks to take advantage of. So when I think about the importance of the arts and how it plays into the sciences, I think about information dissemination. If we are to get better at communicating to a lay audience about research, we know from our own research that visual communication can really facilitate people's understandings. These are things we already do in our science. We visualize our data, we show stimuli or flow of research progress. These are all visual aspects that facilitate our communication to a lay audience, but also facilitates how we might even conduct our research as well. We know that people are visual creatures, and so I think those two interplay really nicely together, and we really can't do one without the other.
I think Chanel touched on that really well. Like in the context of own race bias, we would not be able to study this theory without images of other, of people's faces, which is that stimuli. Even like with the different ways of researching it, it does center around an image of a face, and so the theories about like memory and recognition and all that does really rely on imagery. And I think all of that does like impact the outcome of our research, as well as maybe like the interest, and all of these things really come in hand to hand. One of the things that I needed to really understand getting initially into the project was reading research papers by previous like significant authors in own race bias. And with that really helped me understand how is this research, what is currently being said on this topic, if gender is even played in it, since we did have an assumption. Like there hasn't been much studies on tested gender, and so that was to like double check if anyone did any analysis. And I guess like all of this purpose was to fuel my sort of expertise on the topic so that I could eventually like look into old data sets and reanalyze it and re-encode it for gender, because some of the data sets that Chanel hadn't been reanalyzed for that specific aspect for gender. And so having that knowledge really tied it in for the purpose of the project was to later look at data, look at it through the scope of gender, and see like if there is anything noticeable, and if our hypotheses fit in with that.
I think it's really important for any faculty to really engage in this kind of close mentorship with students. It can be easy to not make time and space for that individual level mentorship, especially at a big university like this. But really, these kinds of opportunities are ways to remove barriers for a lot of students who may not have a good understanding of what it's like to walk through academia. The space of academia is very there are a lot of barriers, especially based on the identities you hold, the experience you have, where you come from. And this kind of mentorship can really remove a lot of those barriers, because you're providing access and resource and education to students who might not have those resources, access, and opportunities. And that's really, especially with my lab's goal and CSWS's mission of studying marginalized experiences and how to remove those barriers. I think if you have those values, then you should try to prioritize engaging in this kind of level of mentorship, because those are the things that help remove that leaky pipeline problem, right? That we're all trying so hard to work at, and you have to do it at every level, structural levels, but also at an individual level. And this is one individual level way that we can try to overcome those issues and barriers. And so it's something that's tangible that anyone can do at an individual level. So to me, it's like, why wouldn't you do it? So I would just encourage people to think about how they can engage in that kind of mentorship here.
I think not a lot of undergraduates know that it is very accessible to join a research lab and get involved in research projects. Obviously, I can't speak for all the labs at University of Oregon, but I think oftentimes, like we're always seeing, like in the psych department at least, like seeking RAs and stuff, and I don't think there's a lot of coverage on what does that mean to be a research assistant. How do you apply? Like how research is important if you do want to go into master's or PhD, and so I think that's why all of these research funded projects and being in a lab really helps get that motivation for a lot of undergraduates, and maybe even end up realizing, like changing their trajectory on their career, because a lot of times people don't really, I don't think just because you're in college means that you know exactly what you want to do for the next rest of years of your life. And so with these like special opportunities that you have in undergrad, it really helps you maybe learn more about yourself and then your interests. Like at least for my case, I didn't know anything about research, or that I could be a part of a research project, or that I could do like a PhD in psychology research and end up having like a good career out of it. And so I think these are all these things that you don't know unless you like go out and experience it yourself. And so I think that's why it is important to have these like opportunities for undergraduates to get more involved and also build connections in this field, since that's also just as important. I mean, no other undergraduates as well. Like all the RAs in this lab, we're all like friends, and even like for classes and all that, like within the school UO, I always go to them for advice outside the lab. And I think it's just a very nice space that like research labs and funded research helps with undergraduates.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to sound like a researcher here, but we had all these hypotheses. We spent a lot of time talking about them, and all that build up to actually analyzing and finding the results and having your results be supported, like, that's huge. It doesn't always happen, and so I would say that was a huge moment, and I think very exciting, but also suggests that this is promising, that we should follow up on this. And like, I'm really excited to see Anisha take this work and move forward with this. Like, this is not the end of this. Now Anisha is working on developing her own study that she's going to collect based on these findings. So it's really just the start of a new line of research, which I think is super exciting.